Good evening, everyone, and welcome, and happy Hanukkah. We are starting tonight. We're starting to study lesson number, chapter number 30th. So, just a short introduction to the chapter. Until now, the rabbi was trying to assist us in observing the Torah and following God's commandments by convincing or fighting the evil. The last chapter, 29, we spoke about screaming and yelling at the evil, at the Yetzer Hara, the evil soul, by reminding it its past, that you were not that great, and by reminding it that is causing us to be going away from God. In this chapter, the rabbi is going to go shifting to a whole different topic. And that is to remind us that in order for us to control the evil, we need to practice humility. Humbleness is the greatest trait. It's the one that keeps our heart open for God. If I want godly soul to rule, I need to allow space. In order for me to allow space, I need to be humble. If I consider myself successful and great and achieved so much, what it does is creating an ego. And I'm giving it to you in just a very quick summary. The ego will dare to hold us back from connecting to another person, from enjoying the company of others and serving God. So, here are a few introductions to humility. There was a very famous professor, Professor Velvel Green. He passed away about 6 years ago. Very fascinating story. He was a well-known leader in the Reform community in St. Paul, Minnesota. And one day, Rabbi Moshe Feller, the shaliach, the emissary of the Rebbe, met him. And he was very spicy human being. He did not accept everything he didn't take anything for granted. And he kept arguing. It took a while, but he met with the Rebbe. He was very inspired. And he was asked the Rebbe questions. One time the Rebbe, he wrote a letter full of questions and contradiction between science and Torah, etc. And the Rebbe refused to answer him. 6 months later, I think, he came in for a private audience and he told the Rebbe, "You didn't answer me." And the Rebbe says, "Of course I didn't answer you, because at the time you're not ready for the answers. But now I'm sure you realize those questions don't exist." And that's what happened. So he became very observant. He grew a beard. He became a professor in Beersheba. They gave him a department, very well known. There is a book where he is describing or bringing all the correspondence he had with the Rebbe, a book full of Rebbe letters in English discussing science. He was a NASA professor, and he brought some of the studying that NASA did to the Rebbe. The Rebbe found mistakes. There are fascinating stories about Velvel Green and his relationship with the Rebbe. One time at a conversation with the Rebbe told them that you are obligated to teach Torah no matter how little you know. And there is somebody who does not know what you know, you have to make sure to share that with them. And it's not their fault that you are slow in your observancy and in your walking closer to God. At the time, he turned to the Rebbe and he says that he's not an observant Jew yet. He did not wear a yarmulke. He didn't keep Shabbat. And the Rebbe says, so because you are not yet doing what's right, you are going to prevent whatever you can inspire others from having that. So he took upon himself to speak publicly. And as a professor, very well known, very well recognized in Minnesota, he would get into speaking engagement. One time he had a debate with a Reform rabbi, which debate is not something we advocate, because you may win the debate but lose the crowd, and for other reasons. But he had a debate with a Reform rabbi. In the middle of the debate, the Reform rabbi, in front of everybody, turned to him and said, I don't understand, what are you arguing with me with? You are not an observant Jew. You don't keep Shabbat just like me. You don't wear a yarmulke. I do at least wear a yarmulke. So why are you thinking, what makes you think that you are representing something that is better than what I think I represent? And Velvel Green said that at the time he was shocked because he didn't have an answer. Actually, that man looked like a very much more observant in his looks. At least he wore a yarmulke. Velvel Green did not wear a yarmulke yet. But then an idea came to his mind, through his mind, and he says to the rabbi the following: You imagine you see a ladder, and on the ladder there are two men. One is on the second rung and the other is on the fourth rung. Who do you think is going to reach the top rung, number 10 or 9, sooner? Who is going to get there sooner? Who do you think? And you might say, on a simple answer, the one who is standing on the fourth rung, he is going to get closer because he's much closer to number 9. That's the destination. However, Green said to him, by me, in order for me to decide who is going to get first, I want to see where they were just a step before. Because the one who is on the second step may have been just 2 minutes ago, he came to the second step from the first, which means he's on ascent. The one who's standing on the fourth rung might be, he was before on the fifth step, and he just came down one step. So perhaps he's in a down spiral. He's going towards the bottom rather than the top. And therefore, the one who is on the second rung might be reaching first the destination. This encapsulates what we're going to be discussing. The rabbi is going to mention, by the way, the rabbi says there is nothing new except illuminating part of the Torah, the written Torah. There is a commandment by our sages to be very humble, bifnei kol adam. It's ethics of our fathers, it's a Mishnah, ve'evei shval ruach, you must be humble, bifnei kol adam, in front of every human being. The Rebbe adds, not necessarily Jewish human being. Every human being, we must humble ourselves and feel that we are not as great as they are. If we are, therefore, we have an obligation to follow. You know why is the mitzvah given to us? In order for us to be able to connect to the godly soul and allow the godly souls to connect to God. How do we achieve that? What if I am greater than that person? How is it possible to say that I am lower than somebody else who is sitting in jail? The Torah tells us, the Mishnah tells us, b'fnei kol adam, which means if I go to visit in jail, I'm going to visit some prisoners, I have to feel that they are greater than me, at least in some aspects. And the question is, how can you feel that way? So for that, I have some stories. There was and before, the idea is that before we get there, before we get to some stories, where the idea of how we feel in vis-a-vis other humans is something that we all are preoccupied. Am I as good as they are? Am I better than they are? Are they better than me? We can divide that internal debate into four categories. One is going to be spirituality. Am I connected to God in a better way than the other person? Do I study more Torah? Do I do more mitzvot? That's the first category. The second category, that where we are kind of debating which one is greater, is when it comes to IQ. Am I smarter than you? Am I as smart as you are, or you're smarter than me? humility dictates that we have to accept that someone else, anybody I see, is smarter than me, more spiritual and refined than me. Number three, my status among my community, my peers. Some who is an executive chef, executive banker, executive a macher, who other people are looking forward to their expertise, whichever area it might be. And the fourth one is wealth, physical, materialistic wealth. Do I have as much money as they, the Joneses? Are they driving as nice car as I do? Are they going on a cruise as often as I do, or I go more? We compare ourselves continuously. These are the four. Aliu, do you remember the four? Number one, spirituality. How am I doing spiritually in comparison to others? Number two, IQ. How is my IQ? Number three, my standing in the community among my peers. Am I a bigger macher than they are? And number four, materialistic. Material wise, do I have a bigger, fatter bank account? Am I taking vacations and spending and I can splurge on more? Or I have to be saving. If I have more money, it makes me step above the rest. I think I shared with you a study was done. I'm sure here everybody would be in the 15%. A study was done about, it took 2,000 people and they offered them $500,000, provided the whole town is going to get $500,000, versus they get only 350,000 and nobody else gets anything. 85% prefer 350 than $500,000, because the money, aside from paying the bills and giving us our necessity, is also a status. Where do I find myself? And if I have more than you, I feel that I'm greater. The Alter Rebbe is going to address across the board on every level that we must feel humble, and therefore the other person is greater than I am. How do you equate that? That's what the Rebbe is going to talk about. But I want to add, here is a quick story. In a town, I forgot the town in Ukraine, there was a shoemaker. It's not a shoemaker, it's someone who fixes shoes, a cobbler. There was you call it a cobbler, right? There was a cobbler that those days it was well-known job. Everybody needed a cobbler at one point or another. I as a child, used to go to the cobbler all the time. So today they don't even want to, half the time they tell you trash the shoe. You can buy it for less, if brand new. So there was a cobbler who decided to open up his shop on Shabbos. And there was a famous chassid who used to go by that open store on Shabbat on the way to synagogue. And every time he went by, he would hold his heart as if he was in pain. One day, it was one of his students, after a couple of weeks, asked him, "Why are you doing that when you pass by?" He says, "It hurts me. I feel like someone is stabbing my heart." And the man said to him, "Why?" He said, "Because I know this man who is open on Shabbat was not raised with a Jewish tradition, has no idea what Shabbat is, and is unable to see the value of not walking on Shabbat. And when I go by, I say to myself, my father and mother raised me with the tradition. I know how special Shabbat is, and he must be greater than I am. So it hurts me to think that my Shabbat, because I probably don't do to the standing of someone who's raised by the proper parents to teach them Shabbat. Had I been doing it in that much greater way, this man would have been acting differently. The fact that I go by and pass and see him, and the Tanya teaches that we have to humble ourselves before every person, it's a Torah way. It means that my Shabbat observancy, the value of it is lower than that person, and that's why it hurts me. And the Rebbe is going to give us some techniques how to practice humility in front of others. Part of it is to judge a stranger favorably. And the chapter is going to be divided into two parts, so we hope to cover the first part. The first part the rabbi is going to cover is about how to judge everyone favorably, even though they are sinners, even though they are causing a lot of trouble, and you can tell that they are not doing the right thing. The second part of the chapter is going to be talking about how to judge ourselves unfavorably, to demand of ourselves more, to realize we have not done enough. And this is the opposite of the way we judge others. So when it comes to judgment, which we do all day long in comparing ourselves to others, we must judge the person that we see favorably. So if they did not tell the truth, if they are late, if they are not respecting you, we have to find good ways to interpret it. If I do it, I have to judge myself to the extent of the law and realize that this is a major misbehavior and it needs to be changed. The rabbi is going to talk about, the chapter is going to be addressing 4 points. When we say humility, to be humble before any human being, we are not dealing with a made-up humility. In other words, some people say, oh, the Torah says you be humble before everybody. It means you have to fake it till you make it. You show them that they're more important. You are extending yourself. You offer them help. You offer them a smile. But in Chabad teaching, the truth is the main thrust. And therefore, if the Torah says you must be humble before any human being, it means that we need to consider the others greater than me, no matter what kind of a person they are. And it's impossible to just fake it till you make it, to act as if I am humble, to act if he's important, as if he's greater than me. Number two, we're going to discover the value of speaking positively about every human being. Judging someone favorably is beneficial for me. It helps me gain the godly soul over the animal soul, because animal soul is all about ego. Number three, as myself, I shouldn't judge myself favorably. In other words, we spoke about judging others favorably, which is a great value, and it will make us much closer to God. But that does not apply when it comes to myself. If you judge yourself favorably, you're causing yourself trouble and you're running away from God. And number four, how do we properly compare ourselves to others? I shared with you there are four categories where we compare ourselves to others. One is spirituality. The second one is our IQ. The third is our standing in society, what influence we have over other people. And the fourth one is materialistic. How do we actually compare ourselves to others? It would be discussed in this chapter. The Rabbi Rayatz, the previous Rabbi, shares in his talk a story. I don't think that he witnessed the synagogue, been into that synagogue, but it's a story very well known, and perhaps I share that on many occasions, worth mentioning again. He says there was a synagogue where they dedicated one akafa. It was a misnagdish, obviously not a Hasidic synagogue. On Simchat Torah, there are 7 rounds, 7 akafot. They dedicated one of the round for all the humble people. Everyone who is humble, sometimes, like we dedicated for Israelis, we dedicate akafa for the Bobbies and Zaidis, we dedicate akafa for children, we dedicate akafa for soldiers, past soldiers. You dedicate akafa for specific people, for specific achievements. So they decided to dedicate one akafa for humble people. and there was a major chaotic fighting erupted because everybody was rushing to grab a Torah, and there was not enough Torahs. And then one of the guys turned around and says, he got the third Torah, but that's only because the other people grabbed it before, because he actually is a bigger, is a much greater, humble person than the other two. But they grabbed it first, and they were not relinquish, which is a dichotomy, because if you're humble, you cannot, you get the point? So there is a similar story with a priest. A rabbi heard of a priest that practiced humility. He was a very humble man. He did not want to speak in public, and he would not rave about himself. So everybody, all his parishioners spoke that how humble he was, that he was the most humble person they ever met. So he decided to meet the rabbi, the priest. And he went and met, and the priest was very happy that the rabbi came to talk to him. And the rabbi says, I heard that you're a very humble man, and the way you conduct yourself personally and in the community, you can also in great humility. That's great. And the priest is getting excited. The rabbi heard about it. And then the rabbi says, is that true? And the man says, yeah, I practice, I don't feel comfortable getting accolades and all kinds of honors. So the rabbi turned to him and says, but then I have a question, a biblical question. Maybe you can help me. The question is, he says to him, it says in the Torah that Moshe was the most humble man most humble person from all men on the face of the earth. Now, how is it possible if you are the most humble person? So how does it... And the priest turned to the rabbi and he says, this question is something that bothers me continuously. So the rabbi says, this is something, you have a question on the Torah, right? To me, this is the answer to that question. It means if it bothers you, then you're not a humble man. So the idea of humility is to consider ourselves lower than any person we meet. And this is a practice all the Chabad Rebbes practice continuously. There is, I believe it's a very fascinating story. And then one more point before we start studying the text. The Alter Rebbe, the one who wrote the Tanya, had 5 sons. They are all in the introduction to Tanya, their names. One of them, the oldest son, became the next Rebbe. We call him the middle Rebbe, because the third one was the grandson, but he wasn't the son of a son, he was the son of a daughter. He had a daughter that died at a young age. The middle Rebbe married a very wealthy man from a community. And he would go to his in-laws to spend a Shabbat, a holiday from time to time. One time, when he was young, this man later became the second Rebbe of Chabad. When he was young, one day he spent Shabbat. And at the synagogue, there was a great chassid, a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, of his father. And the middle Rebbe, this young man, started rebuking and kind of... I wouldn't say disrespecting, but putting him in an uncomfortable position. So this man, this chassid, this old chassid, turned to the future Rebbe, and he says to him, how do you compare you to me? You have a great, great holy father. You have a great holy mother. They prayed before they had you. And I'm sure while they were involved in having you, being blessed with you, they had in mind very holy, pure thoughts. They were contemplating about God, doing it for God's sake. And therefore, when God was looking for a soul to be sent as a son to the Rebbe, he went into the very high level of souls, and he found a very holy soul, and he sent it down. Then, when you're born, you're always surrounded by holy books, by holy people, by always study and pray. And therefore, it's natural for you to be a very learned man, to be a great, great man, and do a lot of big, good deeds. Me, he says, let's compare me to you. My parents were simple people who didn't know how to read and write. I don't want you to imagine what they had in mind while they were having a child born to them. So when God decided to send them a soul, he probably went to the bottom of the list, the stack there, those that and he found a dilapidated soul. He says, "Okay, we'll send him that soul." I was born to parents who there was no Torah, there were no books because they couldn't read. All they did is they kept Shabbat, they kept kosher, but they didn't do much. Then later I got married. Unlike you married a very wealthy family. They support you, they give you all your needs. Me, I lend money to non-Jews so they can buy grain before the winter to plant their fields. And then I have to go collecting. Let me tell you, how do I do to collection in order for me to survive? I go out early in the morning because the farmers, the non-Jewish farmers, they wake up very, very early in the morning. They love to walk in the morning. It's quiet, it's serene, it's beautiful. And I have to take with me a bottle of vodka because without vodka, they wouldn't even talk to you. So you have to drink before you pray. You have to have a good drink with them. And then you have to find a wife and give her a drink too, because she can mess up the deal. She can interfere. So you have to drink with him and his wife. And after they drink enough, you have to say to them, can I have my money back? And that's what I do every morning for the 5-6 days a week. I go around the farms, go to my guys that owe me money, begging. If I'm able to convince 3 or 4 a day to pay back their loan with whatever the interest is, I consider myself a lucky man. You can imagine then when I walk into synagogue to pray, what kind of a prayer is my prayer? I already drank 3 times and I already dealt with these people. So how dare you standing here and talk to me as if I'm, you're greater than me and you know. 6 months later, this Chassid came to visit the Rebbe, his father, the Alter Rebbe. When he came into private audience with the Rebbe got up and says to him, I owe you a big one. He says, really? For what? He says, the talk you gave my son in synagogue crushed him. He finally was able to understand what it means to be humble before anybody else, any other human being. So when he came home, he was all so bitter, so broken, he was crying. And he said to me, I have taken a good, deep, serious inventory about my life, and I've discovered that I'm very, very far from God. Please help me. That's what he turned to me. So all my upbringing and all my being close with them didn't get to that point. But when you had this talk, after he kind of spoke to you in a harsh way, you were able to penetrate deep into his heart to make him realize that he's very, very far from God, or that he's far from where he belongs. And that brings me to the other point that the rabbi is going to make, and that is, in our universe, we judge everything based on the outcome. The outcome. You want to be a good stockbroker? If you perform well, assuming you were not outperformed by everybody else in the office, you're a good stockbroker. What if you give them good advice and it's good companies, but it did not produce? They fire you. The outcome, the results. What are salesmen all about? I know of a company in town that the salesman must produce every month, and as soon as they don't 1 month, they're fired. Even though it's a public traded company, they are having high demands. They will pay well, but you have to perform. Judaism say you never judge a person by the outcome, by the results, but rather you judge a person by the efforts. How much effort does a person makes? And therefore, someone is on the fourth wrong and another is on the second. It doesn't mean the one on the fourth is greater. because if he's coming down, we assume he'll keep going down. If someone made it to the second, we assume that he'll keep climbing. So if I have someone who is very observant, who keeps Torah and mitzvot and adheres to it, but there was no efforts involved, he does it because he has to, because the parents is watching, or because that's his job, for whatever reason, it's convenient, that's how he makes a good living, versus a person who does much less, but is putting a lot of challenges, going through a lot of challenges and hardship in God's eye and in the human being's eye. That's the idea that Rabbi is going to make. We must realize that he is far greater than we are. Yes, Harry.
Nice to meet people on the way up. You don't know if you're going to meet them on the way down.
You don't know if you're going to meet them on the way down. Okay, thank you. So again, the rabbi is going to make the point that in Judaism, you do not judge a person based on their achievements, rather you judge them based on their efforts. So if someone has no effort required to reach the top of the Everest mountain, the value is very little compared to someone who reached a very small peak, but it took a lot of efforts and energy. That is what's valued by God. That's why God created us, by the way, as Beinonim, not as tzaddik. In other words, God enjoys the effort. The more effort we put, the greater we are, the closer we get to God. So there might be someone who does very observant, he does all the commandments God gave us and study Torah all day. If it comes to him very easily because he gets paid to do that, because that's the only thing he knows, it cannot be compared to someone who does much less but works very hard to get there. Let's read the text inside. There was I believe it was a group of men who came to the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, with a question about chapter number 30th. And they said that they studied this chapter and they have a question. They have a neighbor who they witnessed did not wash hands before he ate bread, did not make blessings before he ate bread. He ate bread and he walked away. In other words, he violated so many laws and they can't find it that they are worse than him. So the Tzemach Tzedek responded to them in the following. He says, let's see how you judge the person. You say that you did not watch him, you did not see him wash hands. How do you know if he did not wash hands earlier in another room? So you're not sure. You already judged him unfavorably. Blessing, you said he did not make a blessing for the bread. Perhaps he ate bread just 20 minutes ago and he had in mind to come out into the dining room or to the living room or to the porch and eat bread, but he did not need to make a blessing. So that's the second one. And besides, even if he did not make the blessing before the bread is rabbinic enactment. Okay? Then you say that you did not see him recite grace after meal. How do you know he didn't grace? Maybe he had in mind to continue the meal inside in his bedroom or in his office and then do grace meal. So you judged him unfavorably on 4 levels. Washing, the blessing, and the grace after meal. So it's 3 on 3 levels. But what you just did is you spoke lashon hara. You spoke gossip, slander. Slander is a Torah prohibition. So no matter what the spouse person did, he did not behave as bad as you did just now by relating the story. Therefore, where are you having the right to compare yourself to that person and say that he's very, very, in a very low standing in relations to God, and therefore you cannot find to be humble before him? Ali, you got it? Page 403, chapter 30. Chapter 30. In chapter 29, the Alter Rebbe discussed various means of overcoming timtum halev, the state of insensitivity in which one's heart is dull and unresponsive to his contemplation of God's greatness. All these methods are aimed at crushing one's spirit, whereby one crushes the cause of the Timtum Alev, the arrogance of the Sitra Achra of the animal soul. We spoke about the fact that when you crush the body, so spiritually, you're crushing the animal soul. By crushing the animal soul in various ways, the Rebbe gave us methods. You are crushing the animal soul, and therefore the godly soul will be able to connect to God. In chapter 30, the Alter Rebbe continues this discussion by outlining another method of dealing with this problem. Says the Rebbe, one who suffers from Timtum Alev means the dullness of the heart to spirituality, must also set his heart to fulfill the instruction of our sages, be lowly of spirit before every man. This is in Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 4, Mishnah 10. Now, a number of commentators have noted a difficulty in this Mishnaic dictum. For the Hebrew language distinguishes between two types of humility. The first is a feeling of inferiority in comparison with others. The second is the absence of self-glorification, even while recognizing one's superiority. The thought that his superior qualities are a God-given gift and that another person similarly endowed might, in fact, have invested them to better advantage. The former type of humility is called shiflut, literally lowliness, and the latter is anivut. Let me explain if you or did not understand what the rabbi is saying. The Torah, there are two types of humility that exist within Judaism. The Torah tells us there is one called anava. Anava means I know that I'm very smart. I know that I'm very capable. However, when I meet you, I say to myself, if you had the same talent I do, you would have achieved much, much more. And therefore, I humble myself. Therefore, I don't feel that I'm that great. That's one thing. That's anava. Shiflut means that I am a nobody, that it's impossible to be proud of the IQ I have because you have so much more, and my IQ is way, way low in the scale. That's what shiflut. When the Mishnah in Ethics of Our Father says, "Ve'evei shfal ruach," it doesn't just mean be humble, it's to lower yourself to such a low level that anyone else is far greater than you. So the comparison is not there to compare if you had my talent, what would you do with it? You do a lot better. The comparison is my talent has no value because I see you and you have many more talents and you do a lot more and you're much more capable. And that's what the Rebbe is asking, how a person can achieve that.
See, should never mention that spiritually, always honor.
Honor.
Yeah.
Because he could not ignore the fact that he was the one between God and the Jewish people. Therefore, to be shpal is not appropriate to apply for Moshe. Therefore, he was an honor. By the way, the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, used to say that someone who is very humble would live a long life. Why? Because humility is compared to dust, to dirt, to earth. Earth stands forever. Right? In our universe, this element exists forever, as opposed to other elements. So if someone compares himself to the earth that allow people to step on them and walk on them without them retaliating or getting hurt, they are like the earth, and just like the earth exists forever. ונפשי כעפר לכל תהיה. My soul should be like the dust to everyone. Exactly. In other words, the plants and trees, they can go for thousands of years, but they would not exist forever. The same is about animals or human, different categories. Earth is the base from what everything started, and it will be here for as long as the universe is around. And therefore, when I lower myself to that level, I have adopted some of the traits of the earth. Says the Rebbe, since the Mishnah employs the adjective shfal ruach, it is explicitly advocating the former type of humility. And here the difficulty arises. Why should one regard himself as being lowlier than every man, lowlier even than the lowliest sinner? So if I go to visit a prisoner and I see there all kinds of people, I should consider myself lower than where they are. Not because I have talent and if they use my talent, they can do more. It's because what they possess is far greater than what I have. And according to Chassidus, you cannot fake it, as I said. This is for real. This is the truth. Says the Rebbe, because of this difficulty, some commentators interpret the Mishnah as saying, conduct yourself self-efficiently towards every man. That is, treat every man with deference as though he were superior to you. Some commentator says it's not for real, it's impossible, and therefore you act as if they are greater than you. So when you see someone who is a total no good Nick, you say to yourself, he's very far from God. But I'm going to treat him according to the Mishnah dictum as if he's greater than me. So I smile, I'm patient, I'm very courteous, I help them, whatever I can do because he's greater than me. Says the Rebbe, huh?
Yeah, by the grace of God, go on. So that puts you in the whole category. But for God, to give you that person.
Again, what's it?
There, the grace of God, go on.
What did you say? How is it going?
There, but for the grace.
There, but for the grace of God, goes I.
Not for Hashem, how could be that person? So I should feel that I'm not superior to them.
There, but for the grace of God, go I. Okay, very good. But there is very difficult to say that everyone else is much better than me. And that's the point. What we say is to practice humility, which is anava, which means that they deserve my attention, they deserve my respect, they deserve my being there for them. But it doesn't mean that they are greater than me. And Avot in Ethics of Our Fathers tells us that every human being I meet is greater than I am. The Alter Rebbe, however, objects to this interpretation as follows. The wording implies be thus, veheve, be thus, and do not merely act thus in all sincerity. It says that you must be, you be thus, and not like. And therefore, we do need to sense anyone around us as greater than we are. In the presence of every man, even in the presence of the most worthless of worthless men, kal shebakalim, the worst type of a human being, we are not as great as special as they are. We are much lower than they are.
It's kal, simple kal.
Kal is light. The word kal is light, but it's a borrowed term. In the Talmud, kal refers to someone who is very light on good deeds. Afilu kalim meleim mitzvot kerimon. Even a very light person is full of good deeds, like a pomegranate. That's why. So kal shebakalim is a term to the most extreme light person, most extreme person in regards to spirituality. Having rejected this interpretation, however, we remain to the original difficulty. How is one expected to regard himself as being lowlier than the lowliest sinner? In answer, the Alter Rebbe states that the introspective Beinoni will find that he often fails to wage war against his evil inclination to the same extent as the sinner is required to wage war against his desires. Although the lapses of the Benoni may be in seemingly inconsequential matters, they are more reprehensible than the lowly sinner's transgressions. Thus, even the Benoni, whose observance of the Torah and mitzvot is impeccable, can indeed regard himself as being lowlier than literally every man. As the Alter Rebbe goes on to say, says the Rebbe, you are comparing yourself to the other by the virtue of your achievements. I keep Shabbat, I keep kosher, I study Torah, and this guy is in jail. He doesn't do none of it. But Torah demands that we compare about ourselves into the efforts of other people. So they may be lacking in observancy, but their efforts, the little effort based on their background, based on their surrounding, as the Rebbe will bring those two conditions, his effort might be far, far deeper and harder than me studying Torah and keeping the mitzvot. And therefore, I should regard myself lower than that person because his effort is far greater. This can be accomplished by following the instruction of our sages. Judge not your fellow man until you have stood, that is, place yourself in his place. For it is literally his place, that is, his physical environment, that causes them to sin, since his livelihood requires him to go about the marketplace all day, and whenever he is not thus engaged, he is of those who sit at the street corners. Thus his eyes see all sorts of temptation, and what the eyes see, the heart desires. Additionally, it may be his spiritual place, the nature of his evil impulse that leads him to sin. His evil nature burns like a baker's fiery oven, which is heated with greater frequency and intensity than the domestic oven. As it is written in Hosea, it burns like a flaming fire. It is different, however, with he who goes about but little in the marketplace, and most of the day he is at home rather than at the street corners, and he therefore encounters less temptation. Says the Rebbe, and even if I'm continuing to reading, even if he does go about the marketplace all day, so that his physical place is the same as the of the Kal Shebakalim, this low life person, it may be that the spiritual place is different in that he is not so passionate by nature and is therefore not as greatly tempted by sights of the marketplace. Why? For the evil impulse is not the same in everyone. One person's feature more passionate and the other less so, as explained elsewhere. Let me explain what the Rabbi is telling us. The Rabbi is saying very clearly, the Torah tells us, do not judge a person until you reach his place. What does it mean reaching his place? It refers to two concepts. One place refers to the locale. Where was he brought up? His home that he was raised, the parents who guide him, his friends, his classmates, his college, his town. Are they all cheaters? Are they all non-observant? Therefore, where he comes from to where he is a great, great achievement. And therefore, when I look at that person, I say to myself, he is greater than me because he put a lot of effort. It's come to him much harder. That's one place. Place refers to the upbringing, the social environment, the community, the people. There is another type of place. That place refers to his heart. Do not judge a person until you reach his place. How do you know what temptation he is facing? First, he might be in a greater passion to sin. Some people have a great burning desire to lie, to steal, to do whatever is inappropriate, to eat certain food. Others don't have that because they were born in a different place. They didn't have that passion for misbehaving, for conduct that's against God. And therefore, for me, doing what's right versus that person, is inappropriate because that person, when he does even partially, his achievements is far greater because he worked much harder. In other words, you judge a person by their efforts, and you don't know how much of an effort he is placing. Yes.
That reminds me from, I think from Socrates or one of them, it's one of the philosophers. Always be kind because, always be kind because everyone is fighting a difficult battle.
Everyone is fighting a difficult battle. Okay.
I think that's an important.
But the rabbi is saying is even farther, that his difficult battle is far deep greater than my battle. And therefore, even though as judging by the results, I'm way above, I've done a lot more, it doesn't mean that I'm closer to God, because if it took him a lot more efforts, he's actually far greater. You don't judge by the results, you judge by the effort. And there are many, many stories to that effect where people who have the Lubavitcher Rebbe pointed out to someone who he asked the person to be an observant Jew, and the Rebbe said, he told the Rebbe, he sent back a message that you ask for too much. And the Rebbe says to him, what I've asked is for the efforts. So whatever you change from what you did yesterday is considered full observancy. So if that person is not used to keeping Shabbat and keeping kosher and eating and celebrating holidays, and just by refraining from going out to eat out non-kosher place, and then by refraining to mix milk and meat. In other words, the effort is there, and therefore they are, as long as they're putting a lot of effort, they are fully observant. Now, when I see that person, and I say to myself, for me, if I ate non-kosher, I would throw it up because I can't. My body, thank God, should not be willing to accept that. Therefore, my keeping kosher is no big deal, it's very little. If I see someone, I meet someone who is not keeping kosher, I need to humble myself to the level of realizing that he is probably closer to God, even though he's not fully observant, he's not fully kosher yet. But the efforts that he put humbles me to realize that I have leaps and bounds before I can connect to God. Ali, do you understand that? However, this should not serve as an excuse. A lot of people will take it as an excuse and they say, oh, as long as I put effort. So the Rebbe is going to tell us that judging others favorably is the key is others, not myself. Myself, I have to use the exact opposite as we'll get to later. Here, oh, it's already almost done. Here, the Rebbe is pointing out that if I am, as the Mishnah, it's a Mishnah's command, judge, be very humble, feel yourself the lower than any of the lowliest person, feel yourself even lower than they are. Says the Rebbe, the reason for it is because you don't know until you are in their place. Place meaning upbringing, social networking, location, as well as what kind of a heart, a burning heart, are they have a craving for cheeseburger, they have a craving for all kinds of food that is forbidden. And if they do it and refrain from, there is a story, there was a man I met here in town, and we became very close friends. He told me, he actually came from St. Paul, Minnesota. He used to live there, and then he met a girl, she was a classmate. She widowed, and he married her, and they moved here to town, to Longboat Key. And he told me the story that he was very well-to-do, and there was a gathering of businessmen once a year that they used to have a barbecue at a golf club, I think. So there was a big barbecue. It's very famous chef would come and cook. Anyway, he met the rabbi in St. Paul, and he learned that on Passover, you eat only matzah, not bread. So he decided that the golf outing was in April, always doing Passover, most of the time doing Passover. So next year, he's going to make sure that he's not eating the hamburger and bread, because you're not allowed to. The problem was that the hamburger was ham. But this didn't bother him. So he told me that he himself, it's a famous story, he told me, he says to me that year when I became careful about matzah, I brought myself 2 matzahs and I went to the chef. He was by the grill, grilling the ham. And I says, when you serve me, I want you to not use the bun, but use matzah from top and the bottom. Huh? A ham sandwich and matzah. Now, when he would say to me, I would be beaming because it reflects how close is he getting to God. I said to myself, do I serve God with kosher in the same level as he does? Everybody else has bread with the ham and he has matzah with the ham. That meal went up to heaven a lot faster and he was much closer to God than me keeping Passover and eating matzah. I hope the point is made. And the rabbi is going to continue with the idea is that not judging yourself favorably, only judging others favorably. We'll continue next week, God willing. Thank you, everybody, and have a happy Hanukkah. We hope to see you next week, next month, next year. Goodbye, everybody.